This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Christina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
Howdy, folks. This is Lou Elizondo, and you are listening to my very good friend Christina Gomez on Shifting the Paradigm.
This is Ray Sobbs from the UnX Network, and you're listening to Shifting the Paradigm with the intrepid Christina Gomez on the X.
You're listening to the UnX Network, KUNX-DB, Kansas City, Missouri.
Welcome to Shifting the Paradigm. I'm Christina Gomez on the Paradigm Shifts channel and on the X, the new mainstream KUNX digital broadcasting talk radio. Are you ready for this? Because we're about to embark on an hour and a half of UFO shenanigans and paranormal adventures. Right here is where we look and think outside the proverbial box. We jump down those rabbit holes where you get a red Tic Tac instead of a red pill. Before we start, make sure you subscribe and share these shows on social media to those who you think are having their minds and eyes open to the reality of the UFO mystery. All of these shows are great primers, and in the push for more clarity, transparency, and disclosure, the more voices demanding answers, the better. For those listening on KUNX Talk Radio and affiliates, I have two other shows each week that only air on my YouTube channel. Mysteries with a History is live on Thursdays at 2:30 p.m. PST with my co-host Jimmy Church of Fade to Black Radio, and each week we cover a different topic in depth. On Fridays at 3 p.m. PST, the live show Strange Paradigms is where I and a different guest co-host cover all the strange weekly news and mysterious headlines from around the world. So definitely check out my website at strangeparadigms.com for all show archives, more information, and direct video links to my channel. Oh, and make sure to hit the notification bell on YouTube. I'm still getting too many messages from viewers that when they click the bell, they are not getting notifications. And then when they return to my channel, they realize that the bell has been turned off. And some have even stated they have unsubscribed without their knowledge. So please make sure that you are subscribed and getting notifications. Have you been to the UnX Network KUNX website yet? There you can get their free digital quarterly magazine. Go to unxnetwork.com to get their magazine, see their blog postings, latest events, and all the amazing shows on KUNX. Again, it is the unxnetwork.com to sign up for a free digital magazine. This month's focus is time travel. I have so many questions when it comes to time travel. So this quarterly magazine is perfect for those that want to stay up to date with the new and old theories that surround this fascinating topic, as well as so many others. Also, make sure to follow them on Twitter at KUNXDB. Do you know what else is free other than these shows that I produce on this channel? You can get a 7-day free trial to the Skinwalker Ranch Insider to see all the live cams on the ranch, blog postings, periodic live Q&A with the crew, and the ability to chat in the live chat with the Skinwalker Ranch team members. So for those that want to be more hands-on with the research conducted there and speak with like-minded people, become an insider. The link is below to start your 7-day free trial. Also, I've just started doing fun daily strange news and events shorts, which are 60-second videos on YouTube. So make sure to check them out, like them, and share them. Now, time for some quick news. Do you pick your nose? That's a silly question. Whether you're in the trusted company of your spouse or sneaking a quick one when you think nobody's looking, we all pick our noses. Other primates do it too. But here's what you need to know before you pick and flick. Nose picking is an entirely natural habit. Children who have not yet learned social norms realize very early on that the fit between their forefinger and a nostril is pretty good, but there's a lot more than just snot up there. During the roughly 22,000 breath cycle per day, the booger forming mucus up there forms a critical biological filter to capture dust and allergens before they penetrate our airways, whether they may cause inflammation, asthma, and other long term pulmonary issues. Cells in your nasal passage, called goblet cells, named after their cup like appearance, generate mucus to trap viruses, bacteria, and dust containing harmful substances like lead and pollen. Nasal mucus and its antibodies and enzymes are the body's frontline immune defense system against infections. The dust, microbes, and allergens captured in your mucus eventually get ingested as that mucus drips down your throat. So, you may worsen particular environmental toxin exposures if you sniff or eat boogers up instead of blowing them out. In other words, sticking a digit in your nose is a great way to jam germs further into your body or spreading them around your environment with your snotty fingers. In other news, by the Daily Star, a hunter had claimed that he had spotted the elusive Bigfoot and did nothing about it. Sightings are becoming more and more common in the United States, and a hunter identified as Bew told the Sasquatch Chronicles podcast that he had the beast in the scope of his rifle for 20 minutes. Although he doesn't say where this was located, he recalled, quote, "Immediately, when I saw it, it was so black that I thought it was a bear. I put my gun up on the shooting rail and scoped it. It was going down to the ground and standing up real tall like a person. I thought it was a bear, then I thought it was a man, and I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it didn't have fur that looked like bear fur. It looked like something that you would see in an army movie when snipers crawl through the dirt. And this thing had big shoulders and a big back. He was probably around 140 yards from me. I was zooming in and out looking for boots or gloves or a hat, and I figured that maybe it was a poacher but with no gun." Bew went on to claim that the beast walked over to a tree, stretched up, and scratched the back of his leg on it. He also recalled that the unidentified beast just looked like a big man, and it came as close as 40 yards toward him before disappearing into shrub land nearby. Fans of the podcast were quick to praise the hunter for not shooting. One user wrote, "Well, Bew, thanks for your exciting description of what you felt and witnessed. I don't recall ever hearing of a Sasquatch being seen hunting like that, and I'm glad you didn't shoot." With the news out of the way, let me talk about my guest. Robin Hanson is an associate professor of economics at George Mason University and research associate at the Future of Humanity Institute of Oxford University. He has a doctorate in social science from California Institute of Technology, master's degree in physics and philosophy from the University of Chicago, and 9 years experience as a research programmer at Lockheed and NASA. Robin has diverse research interests. with health incentive contracts, product bans, evolutionary psychology, and bioethics of healthcare, initiatives to fake expertise, Bayesian classification, self deception in disagreement, wiretaps, image reconstruction, the history of science prizes, reversible computation, the origin of life, the survival of humanity, very long term economic growth, growth given machine intelligence, and interstellar colonization. He also coined the phrase the Great Filter and has recently numerically estimated it via a model of grabby aliens. Welcome to Shifting the Paradigm, Robin. How's it going today?
I don't know. It's just a day, but you're going to make it better. This is going to make it all worthwhile.
Oh, you're so sweet. For those that are not familiar with you, your work and experience, can you tell us about yourself?
I'm an associate professor of economics at George Mason University. I'm just about to turn 63 years old, so I've had a long career. I've been an economics professor here since 1999. Previously, though, I spent basically a long time as a computer researcher in artificial intelligence at NASEED and Lockheed. And then before that, I got degrees in philosophy of science and physics. So I've really been all across the map. And my recent work has one book in psychology, another book in futurism, recent work in astrophysics. So that's me. I'm just all across the map.
Yes, you definitely are. When I read your bio, I was like, oh my goodness, you have done everything and anything. But then it makes me question, why the interest in UFOs and why do you talk about it publicly?
I think I'm just interested in the usual topics ordinary people would be interested in. I think academics learn to sort of discipline their interest to stay away from certain topics that seem dangerous, and I'm just less inclined to do that.
You co-authored the book The Elephant in the Brain, and you address many things that I believe are so fascinating dealing with the human psyche. But one question you ask is, why do we prefer to speak instead of listen? Did you find an answer to that question?
Well, we have a hypothesis that fits in the rest of the book. The idea is that instead of actually trying to collect information and learn about the world through our conversation, we're more trying to show off to our conversation partners. So collecting information would be best achieved by listening and not talking, but showing off is better achieved by talking, taking up the stage and being impressive.
So, overall, why is it important to listen, Robin?
Well, again, if you wanted to actually learn things, if you wanted to get information from all the other things everybody knows, almost everything any of us knows about the world, we get secondhand. Instead of learning it directly through our own personal experience and experiments and data, we are learning indirectly through all of the other things people have seen.
So, for instance, when we are looking at children, we are aware that they're very much like sponges in the sense of they look at their parents, they look at their peers, and they try to replicate or emulate their actions. Would that be something that would be considered healthy, or can it be, in a sense, dangerous, in your opinion?
It's one of the superpowers that allowed humanity to become what it has. So without this powerful ability of young people to copy older people and to learn from the best, we just wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are today. So let's celebrate it and encourage it. But of course, it can also go wrong. If you copy the wrong people, or people are sort of too eager to sell you on things, you can absorb things that you might rather not.
So, for those that are adults and they still, I guess, in a sense, are like sponges and or could be considered gullible, in your opinion, from your research, how could they fix that?
So I usually recommend that young people, if they want to learn things, just read textbooks and review articles, which are our best summaries of everything we know. But in order to judge how much they can trust those textbooks or review articles, it would help to go to the frontier of knowledge in a few places. This can be in, I don't know, poker play or astrophysics or whatever it is, just go into some very specific area of knowledge and go all the way to the frontier. That is, find out what humanity knows at that level and see the difference between what it is humanity knows when you see everything humanity knows in that particular area, and then what textbooks and review articles tend to say about it. And that will show you the degree of correspondence. It'll give you a sense of when people lie in the textbooks, which they do.
It seems to be that way. And I feel that when we are looking at trying to understand the world, I think the most difficult thing to understand is kind of our unconscious. So, what do our unconscious motives say about our interests in UFOs? Do you think the end goal is for us to, when we receive disclosure, or at least what we perceive as disclosure in whatever form it may come, how do you think we would react to that?
Well, clearly, one of the things going on with UFOs is that it's a taboo topic. So, one of the main things you can achieve by having a stance about UFOs is to either show your support for the usual authorities who declare it to be a taboo topic, or to show your defiance of them by embracing it. And either approach, of course, is not oriented around the actual truth of UFOs or what's behind them. It's oriented more about identifying with different social groups, either, again, supporting authorities or defying them.
And could you please go into detail in which ways the topic could be considered taboo from your understanding?
Sure. So, sometime around 1940 or so, just the usual scientific authorities decided to declare that that was silly. That is, it was just a ridiculous conspiracy theory to take these UFO sightings seriously as anything other than, Venus or swamp gas. And they threw their weight behind that, and they suppressed, findings or contrary views. And that was just a position that academia took pretty strongly. And so authorities have fallen behind them quickly and strongly. That is, most authorities in most of the world have backed the usual academic position that this is pretty silly and should be ignored.
And from your research, how do UFO sightings affect people's minds or perception of the world?
Well, presumably there's two versions of your question. One version is, how does a individual person seeing something like a UFO in their field of view, how does that affect them? And the other is, how are people affected by reading about UFO sightings? So clearly the first sort of thing is a situation where you have to be wondering, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Right? Because I've inherited this culture that tells me that's pretty silly and you shouldn't find that very believable, with apparently seeing something in front of your eyes. And you have to start to pause and wonder, well, what could I be misunderstanding? What time of day is this? What sort of thing could that be? Is that a reflection? Is that an airplane, et cetera, right? So that's what will happen to you if you are personally seeing a UFO. The second question is, how does this topic affect an ordinary person think about it? And again, I said that the main first way people frame it is in terms of supporting or defying authorities on the topic. Do you find how much is this evidence you're seeing going to move you away from your initial inclination?
Interesting. Thank you for explaining it like that. And you have extensively talked about a type of alien that is somewhat aggressive, which you've named grabby aliens. But for those that are listening to you for the first time, can you please explain your findings and mathematical model to your theory?
Okay, so when we look up in the universe, it's vast. Just today, we had some new exciting photographs of distant parts of the universe. There's lots of interesting things out there, but it all looks completely dead. Now, so there's two kinds of aliens that might be out there, which I'll call quiet and loud. Quiet aliens would be small, far away, and not doing very much with wherever they are. And those aliens are very hard to see. There could be a lot of quiet aliens out there. But a different kind of alien is a loud alien. A loud alien would expand rapidly into a very large volume over millions of years. And in that very large volume, it would just change things in a big way. And then over time, it would just be really obvious if they were out there. And so one of the main things we can say when we look up to the sky is we don't see loud aliens. And that's a striking fact about the universe, that we don't see them. So our model of grabby aliens is a particular mathematical version of loud aliens. It's a particular way to model the idea that there could be such aliens out there. And we're trying to confront this evidence that we don't see any in the sky with a model of what would they do and how would they behave in order to be able to ask, but are they out there anyway, even though we can't see them?
And how long did it take you to come up with this model?
Well, I originally wrote on a related topic of what's called the Great Filter back in 1998 and earlier. And then a year and a half or so ago, I returned to the topic and when I read a paper that pointed out a particular factor that I thought had been neglected. So that's therefore most of the work I've done on grabby aliens has been in the last 2 years.
And when you were doing this research, how did it change your perspective of the universe, or did it remain the same?
Well, to tell you how it changed my perspective, I have to tell you our answers. So we have a 3-parameter model of where grabby aliens are in space-time. The parameters are the speed at which they expand and 2 parameters of how fast they appear in time. One is a constant and one is a power and a power law, which says that they appear more often later in time. It turns out we can fit each of these parameters to data we have so that we can actually know the values of these 3 parameters for this model and therefore be able to say where are grabby aliens in space and time. And so the answers are that they appear roughly once per million galaxies. And at the very moment, on average, roughly half the universe is now full of them. They have taken over half the universe, but we can't see them because they are expanding at almost the speed of light. And therefore we won't see them until they're almost here. And if we go out and expand like they're expanding, we would meet them in roughly 1 billion years, which is a long way off. So this is the answer of they're out there, but they're a long way away. They've filled half the universe, but it'll still be 1 billion years till we see them. And there's almost no chance there's another one in our galaxy. Again, because they appear once per million galaxies. And the last thing I can say that we know from this model is that we have to believe in this model because otherwise we're crazy early. So the universe is now 14 billion years old, and you might think we are youngins here in a 14 billion. You might think we're oldsters here in a universe of 14 billion years because you might think 14 billion years is a really long time. But the average star out there will last for trillions of years. And if the universe would stay empty waiting for life like us to appear, then we should expect to appear near the end of planets around the longest lived stars, which last for trillions of years. And so we should have expected to appear much, much later in the history of the universe. So the fact that we're appearing now early in history says that that basic model can't be entirely right. And the assumption we think is wrong is that that model assumes that the universe would just wait empty until advanced like us would appear. And so instead we say, at some point in time, grabby alien civilizations start to appear, they expand, relatively soon they fill up the universe, and after that, it's too late for a civilization like us to appear. The aliens preclude that. And so we must be appearing now before the deadline. And that's evidence that they're out there right now, filling up the universe. And that's therefore the answer. So the answer to the great question of are there aliens and where are they is we have a 3-parameter statistical model that says where they are in space-time. And we're roughly in the middle of the distribution of when grabby alien civilizations appear at this moment. and they appear once per million galaxies, and we'll meet them in a billion years.
That's an incredibly exciting theory. And my next question is for you. How did you come up with the title Grabby Aliens? I mean, I feel like it's pretty catchy. How did you come up with that?
Well, compared to many of my colleagues, I like sort of catchy little words that are, intuitive for most people. I don't like pompous long phrases, so that's my style.
I absolutely love it. Robin, we are coming towards a break. We'll be right back after this.
Million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, The X.
This is Micah Hanks of the Micah Hanks program right here on KUNX. And right now, you're having your paradigm shifted by the one and only Christina Gomez.
Your new source for alternative talk radio on the internet. The X.
Howdy, folks. This is Lou Elizondo, and you are listening to my very good friend Christina Gomez on Shifting the Paradigm.
Do you have an interest in the paranormal? Then you'll love the unxnetwork.com. The X is your streaming audio and video for everything supernatural, strange, and mysterious, like UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, and so much more. From hosts like Jimmy Church, Whitley Strieber, Micah Hanks, and Christina Gomez. Visit the unxnetwork.com show page for a complete list of all the paranormal programs you'll find on the X. Be sure to follow us on Twitter for updates at KUNXDB. Follow our Facebook group, UNX Network. Find the podcast on Spotify, iHeart, Audible, and Apple Podcast. It's time. It's new. It's the X.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Explaining the unexplained. The new unxnetwork.com.
Hi. This is Race Hobbs, head of programming at the new UNX Network, and you're locked on Shifting the Paradigm with the intrepid Christina Gomez on the X.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Christina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
Live in the moment till I die.
Welcome back. With me today is Dr. Robin Hanson. And from the research that you've done, looking to the theories of quiet aliens and loud or grabby aliens, with everything that's going on with congressional hearings and new governmental UFO offices, in your opinion, do you think people would be ready to hear, yes, there are other forms of intelligent life out there, or yes, we are being visited by extraterrestrials? How do you think it'll come about?
I think there's a big difference between what ordinary people would be willing to hear and what the usual elites would be willing to hear. Again, a long time ago, elites took a strong position that this UFO stuff was crazy. And they're not willing to sort of change that unless there's pretty strong pressures to force them. So I don't think they will give up that position easily for quite a while. But I think ordinary people would be fine with it, but they don't decide these things.
And why not? I mean, we believe, at least in the United States, that the people have the power. So do you think that if we were to kind of push for it, we might get those answers? Or do you think that we might not be getting disclosure, or once again, how we perceive disclosure from the government?
So there's two factors, two parts that should influence your rational opinion on the topic. One is what's called your prior, that is, just based on basic theoretical and other considerations, how plausible are each of the various theories we might have about UFOs. And the other is the evidence, that is the concrete specific sightings and how compelling they are. So I think the main resistance from most intellectuals and academics has been on the prior side. That is, they have drawn the conclusion that this is just a crazy, unlikely scenario. And, it's as unlikely as believing in ghosts or fairies or things like that. And since they're really confident that those are kind of crazy, and they treat this similarly, that's the main resistance. That is, they can't really have self-respect for them, how they think rationally and reasonably, unless they can be persuaded that it's not crazy. So I think that's the key obstacle, that our intellectual elites have decided this is just crazy. And that makes them just less interested or willing to look at the concrete specific evidence. Yes, they get that there is this evidence, and yes, it's got a lot of details and it could take you hours and hours to go through it. But at some level, they're just not willing to do that because it just sounds crazy. And so the way I would try to persuade them to take UFOs more seriously is to talk about the priors, to talk about, well, let's walk through what sorts of possibilities there are for this to make sense, and ask how crazy are those.
So then in that case, would you consider your grabby alien theory crazy or rational?
I consider our grabby alien theory not just rational, but almost, compelled. That is, it's our best explanation of the evidence. So the aliens really are out there. But grabby aliens theory in its simple form says that the UFOs can't be aliens. Because it says, look, on average, they appear randomly in space and once per million galaxies. So the chance that another one would have appeared near us recently is really, really low. And so that makes that a very unlikely prior. And from the point of view of someone who just believes in the grabby aliens theory in a simple form, yes, they should say UFOs being aliens, that's crazy. And I'm not really willing to look at the evidence.
So let's get into that. What are your thoughts on people here on Earth that state that they see UFOs, that they have abduction encounters, that they are contactees? If you think at this point in time, aliens are kind of one in a million, so to say.
Well, so my actual bottom line answer will be the prior chance that UFOs are aliens is 1 in 1,000, which is well above 1 in a million. And I'd say it's high enough that you should look at the evidence. So in a typical murder trial, I might say, what's the chance that a random person was murdered by some random associate? And I might say, that's actually roughly 1 in a million. 1 in 1,000 people get murdered, and they know roughly 1,000 people. So there's a 1 in a million prior that someone was murdered by one particular associate. But we allow murder trials. That is, the evidence that it's possible to present in a murder trial is usually sufficient to overturn that 1 in a million prior to convince you that, in fact, someone's guilty of a murder. So 1 in 1,000 is even better in the sense that 1 in 1,000 is a priori unlikely, but it's likely enough that you should be willing to look at the evidence. So then if you ask me, well, what do I think of the evidence? First of all, I want to say my specialty is on the prior. My expertise and the work that I've done, I think, qualifies me to speak as a world-class expert on the prior. It doesn't qualify me to speak as a world-class expert on the evidence of particular sightings. But if you ask, I will still comment on particular sightings. I will say, well, look, I have looked at, say, the best evidence out there for ghosts or fairies. It's a lot worse. That is, the sort of evidence that you see people bring up for UFOs is a lot more compelling than the best evidence for some of the other things. I'd also remind you of, in the past, we had things we previously classified with ghosts and fairies that we just changed our mind about. So several centuries ago, people thought the idea that rocks fell from the sky was crazy. And that was considered similarly crazy to the rest. And then at some point, people were actually persuaded that rocks had fallen from the sky. Asteroids were a real thing. And then they had to revise their theories about where those rocks could be coming from. Because, of course, you don't look up and you don't see rocks up there. So where could they come from? Right? And another related thing that there's been this reported thing called ball lightning for a long time, little balls of lightning floating around on near the surface. And people thought that was pretty crazy until I think a few decades ago, some people actually made it in the lab. And so once they made some ball lightning floating around in the lab, they said, I guess it's a thing. And they changed their mind. And a third example is that there was a special kind of lightning, a pink lightning that is a sort of a big tree of branches that happens way up high in the atmosphere. Pilots had mentioned seeing it from the very first days that pilots flew high, but they quickly learned to not say anything because people thought that was crazy. And then a few decades ago, NASA had a satellite way up in space looking high in the atmosphere, and it took pictures of all these big pink lightnings. At which point the pilot said, yeah, we've been seeing that. We just been shut up about it because you guys, will think we're crazy and not let us fly. So that's what I might say about the evidence is that, so basically there's been roughly 100,000 like written down UFO sightings where people report and collect evidence and pictures, whatever else it is, through, all the world in the last 70 years or so. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at 100,000 sightings. So could be 80% of them can be explained by, swamp gas or Venus or an airplane reflection or whatever. But there is this core of much harder to explain sightings that, again, it's not my expertise. I'm just going to say, look, that looks serious. Somebody needs to look at that. And it looks a lot better, again, than the best evidence I can find for ghosts or fairies.
So when you were doing your research for the Great Filter and the Grabby Aliens model, did you have to look at past sightings for this research, or did you ever, find an interest in sightings or these types of contactee stories?
Again, I want to break the problem into a prior and the evidence. That is, the chance that, say, UFOs are aliens is based on what's your prior probability that there really could be any aliens who would act like UFOs, and then what's the actual concrete evidence that you've seen out there of particular sightings and who said it and what day it was and were they drunk and how many people confirm it, all those sorts of things, how many different channels of evidence, right? And I just want to be clear, I'm not an expert on the second part. I've skimmed it enough to say, look, it deserves to be taken seriously. It's not just easily dismissed. The attempts I've seen to easily dismiss them seem to me to fail badly. But that's not my expertise. But what I can then say is, well, let's go back to this prior, because again, the main reason most people want to dismiss the concrete evidence is the prior. They say, I don't really care about all your details because this is just crazy. So the question, is it just crazy? Or in probabilistic terms, what's a reasonable prior probability that there could be aliens here who do the sorts of things that UFOs do? How crazy is that? And that's what I can tell you about.
So let's stay on that thought. What do you think about panspermia? Some believe that life on our world came from Mars, or that the octopus could have been a result of panspermia from beyond our solar system. Do you think that's possible?
The octopus seems unlikely because even though octopi have substantially different biological features, they do seem to be pretty close to the rest of the tree of life on Earth. So it seems much more likely that they evolved differently from the tree of life on Earth. But I do think that if you're going to try to come up with the best explanation of UFOs as aliens, you need to start with panspermia. So remember, the Grabby aliens theory says that they appear once per million galaxies randomly in time, which means the chance that another alien species is really close to us in space and time is crazy low. So we'll need to modify the simple Grabby aliens theory if we're going to have any chance of explaining UFOs as aliens. And the simplest modification is to have a correlation, something which makes our appearance and their appearance correlated in space and time. And panspermia can do that. So the idea is there was some other planet before Earth, call it Eden. It existed billions of years before Earth. Life on Eden evolved for billions of years. And then Eden seeded both Earth and an alien planet with life near each other in space and time. And that's why they might be correlated with us in space and time, is because of this common cause. The most plausible time to have seeded life on Earth would be at the very beginning, when Earth was forming around a sun, which was forming in a nursery of thousands of stars that all formed together in the same place and time. And in that early nursery, as the planets were forming, there were all these rocks flying around. Lots and lots of rocks flying back and forth, not only within a solar system, but between solar systems. And so if a rock had come from Eden into that nursery, it not only could have plausibly seeded an early Earth, but also many of the other stars in that same nursery, because they would have all been mixing up together. And so then the hypothesis would be life was seeded on many of the other planets in that nursery. And then within a few million years or so, those stars drifted apart, and they have since spread around the galaxy. And we can actually see them from here based on their spectra. We can identify them. And life evolved on all those other planets. And then one of those other planets achieved our level of technological sophistication before us. So that's the first thing we're going to need in our story if we're going to make sense of UFOs as aliens. It's not the only thing. We're going to need several other parts. But the first thing is we're going to need to hypothesize there really was panspermia. Life on Earth came from elsewhere. And this life from elsewhere seeded some of our siblings, some of the star's siblings. So they are our panspermia siblings.
I found it rather interesting that you called this theoretical planet Eden. And a few weeks ago, I interviewed a man called Paul Thigpen, who is an avid Catholic researcher. And when I was doing a poll for the interview, I asked, do you think Eden originated on Earth? Is it another planet? Is it another dimension? So the fact that you just kind of pulled the word Eden out of thin air, I found that really interesting. Is there a background reason for why you said that?
I have a Christian heritage like most people in our society. And so it's the obvious Christian reference to the origin of life.
That does make sense. Thank you for explaining that. So you wrote another fascinating book called The Age of M that contemplated the possibility of robots ruling the world. So I feel that this next question is appropriate for you. What were your thoughts when Google employee Blake Lemoine said that the artificial intelligence project Lambda was sentient after he held conversations with it?
I wasn't especially surprised because I have also held conversations with some of these recent language models. The context I will put that in is to say, my book, The Age of M, is about a particular route to artificial intelligence based on what's called brain emulations. It's a different route than the more common route being pursued at the moment through programs like that, where we do what's called deep learning and machine learning with a lot of data of models. I was an artificial intelligence researcher for 9 years, long ago, and a thing I can just tell you about AI research, a very consistent trend, is that we just every few years have an impressive new demo that gives people goosebumps. It's just a very consistent thing. People get goosebumps from these things. What that means is they've got in their mind that, computers today are not very good and dumb, but someday computers will be as good as us. And then they see some ability of a computer demo and they go, ooh, is that coming up on my abilities? And that's what gives them the goosebumps. And I'd say this consistent pattern shows us we're just not very good at knowing how close we are. Because, this has been true for 70 years. Even, 50 years ago, there were demos that gave people goosebumps of how impressive they were compared to their previous expectations, even though we now know those were crazy far away from being able to do what the human mind can do. And I would say, given my expert understanding of artificial intelligence, even the most current impressive models that give people goosebumps are still just a really long way away from human level intelligence. It helps drive the field that, again, it drove me in. So back in 1984, I had just finished getting a master's in physics and philosophy of science at University of Chicago. And I read in the news about these exciting new demos with new progress, and it gave me goosebumps. And it gave me the impression that we were almost there. And I wanted to go be part of this field before it was too late, because we were almost going to achieve human level intelligence. And I was just wrong. I was way wrong, because it was just very far away from that ability. But it took me a few years in learning this field to understand really how far away we were. So I think most people who haven't spent a few years learning artificial intelligence, they don't really have a sense for how close any one of these demos says we are. And what I'm telling you is we're still a long way away.
Let's stay on this train of thought. The newest robotic improvement includes using a synthetic skin that can heal when cut and has currently been placed on a robotic finger to attempt to make robots look and present themselves as more human. Have these scientists not seen Blade Runner, where replicants look exactly like humans being indistinguishable, or iRobot, where robots with near human thought take over the world and destroy humans? Is this a silly fear or something to really be considered when creating AI and making them look incredibly human?
A lot rides on whether you frame it as them or us. I think we all have a very strong innate fear of a them, especially an alien them, who can outcompete us. But we are much more okay with parts of us outcompeting parts of us. So I'm an economist, and human history has long been composed of different parts of us getting an edge up over other parts of us and getting an advantage and then growing relatively. But then the rest of us have benefited from that. So people have introduced new technologies and new business techniques, for thousands of years. And at each point somebody did that, their local group got an advantage. But then those technologies spread. People could be their customers, they could be their suppliers. And overall competition has been to the benefit of humanity over a long time. So if we, continue that technology game by making more technologies, then that will on average also be to our benefit. But with AI, people stop and they go, wait, that's a them, not an us. And of course, part of the problem is it's a hypothetical thing. We're talking about movies or whatever, right? We don't actually have any AI that's remotely capable of threatening us. But what we have is fictional scenarios where you present it as a them. Now, in history, people have also worried about that. Like we might say, a century ago, okay, fine, we'll develop the technology, but what if the Germans copy that technology? And what if they improve it? And what if they try to take over, right? So all through human history, people have worried that enemy empires would gain technologies and then come and conquer us. And that's been a real fear. And that fear has been stoked the more different those enemies can be painted as, right? If you're thinking about in the US, people in Alabama out competing people in Virginia or something, you're not so worried because you don't think they're really that different from each other, right? And the more people have been able to paint foreign civilizations as just very different and in particular evil, then the more terrified they can be of foreign competition. And even today, we are still somewhat worried about, say, Chinese competition, because the Chinese are this other people who do things different from us. And so, AI just takes this to the extreme, because since we don't actually have any AI, you can hypothesize some features about what it might be. And then you can hypothesize that not only is it so much better than us, it wants to get us, and it's just got a revenge urge and, it's coming for you, right?
So then if we were to have a bunch of AI everywhere, and let's say we have these kind of realistic looking robots, should we accept them as our friends, as our coworkers, or should there kind of be that line or that sense of bias there, in your opinion?
So in the last few centuries, we've already introduced a new alien species on Earth that is actually more able than any one of us. It's called a corporation. We allowed corporations to appear and then spread across the world. And if you are up in competition with a corporation, you are at a great disadvantage. A corporation is just smarter and more capable than you. And there's a sense in which they are inhuman in their values. Corporations, they want to make money. And they aren't friendly and they don't love you. They are alien. But they aren't threatening you at the moment, I would say. The key idea is we live in a competitive world where we cooperate with each other by competing, so that if a corporation, beats out some local, food maker for your food business, that's because it's doing a better job at giving you what you want. So in a relatively peaceful world where we compete through business, you shouldn't be too afraid that other people out there might make variations that you don't control and don't even approve of, as long as they're limited by the usual competition that limits all the strange things people are creating in the world today. So if you're okay with the rough world as we have it today, of 8 billion people formed in all sorts of different nations, lots of different companies, lots of different cultures, you don't get to approve of all of those, or even many of them. But what you do get to do is say, you don't have my business unless you're giving me what I want. And that is a discipline that does on average mean that they mostly benefit the rest of the world when they appear. That things don't appear and spread unless they do benefit the rest of the world. So now if we get back to AI, we might say, if AI appears in that same way, companies make AIs because it'll help them do their business and will help them better serve their customers. Then as long as you can track whether you're getting served by these businesses, and you can switch if you don't like what they're giving you, then you have less to fear from these businesses using AIs to do whatever they're doing for you. You might be worried about them out-competing you on a job, but you know what? You already have to worry about people out-competing you on jobs. That's what makes you go to school at the moment, is the knowledge that there are people out there who do go to school and they can out-compete you on a job unless you go to school too.
Right. At the end of the day, it's all about that competition. In your time working for NASA as a programmer, the theories that pictures taken of space are airbrushed to remove certain anomalies. What do you say to that?
I was never involved with such airbrushing, so I know nothing about what NASA does with its photos. I expect they have all the usual organizational incentives to make things look good when things go wrong. So just like anybody else out there, something goes wrong, you probably want to just brush it under the table if you get away with it. And I presume NASA does that sometimes just because of you.
Robin, we are coming towards another break. Hang tight. We'll be right back.
Gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX DB, the X.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Christina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
I want to thank all of you for listening to The X. But did you know you can watch live streaming video and catch your favorite video casts on the UNX Network YouTube channel?
Wow, you mean I can watch the X shows anytime?
That's right. Watch any show, anytime, even binge watch your favorite programs.
Which shows are on the UNX Network YouTube channel?
You can watch Most Haunted with Dan Terry, Entity Voices, Paranormal Evidence, Paranormally Blonde, and Unexplained Phenomena Australia, and many more. Also, be sure and catch live coverage of special events and special broadcasts from the UNX Network.
That's great. I'm going to subscribe to the UNX Network channel right now.
Awesome. You can find everything you need to know about the YouTube channel at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for everything unexplained. It's the new mainstream. It's the UNX Network.
Explaining
The unexplained.
the new unxnetwork.com.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? UNX Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNX DB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unxmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unxmedia.com.
Gold loves chaos, uncertainty, and disarray. History shows us what gold does when people aren't sure about the government, the stock market, their jobs, or their retirement savings. Our national debt is skyrocketing. Gold and other precious metals are a defense measure against inflation and a stock market that might take years to recover. So what can you do right now to protect yourself? Call United Gold Group. We offer gold and other precious metals delivered securely within 72 hours. Are you worried about the stock market? We can also help you set up a real gold or silver IRA or a 401k. Safe and secure. United Gold Group makes gold ownership affordable. Call now and get up to $2,500 in free gold or silver with a qualified IRA. Call 800-753-8534. That's 800-753-8534 or visit unitedgoldgroup.com.
writing the book Age of M? Overall, what did you learn, or at least what were you hoping to achieve when writing it?
So, as you may notice, there's a lot more historians than futurists out there. If you look on Amazon, you'll see a huge fraction of all the books, like 20%, are history books, and maybe 1% are futurist books. So the world just really loves historians. But you might say to people, look, we can't do anything about history anymore. It's too late, but we can do something about the future. And that's actually where we're all going to live. So isn't the future more important than the past? And the response you will get is, well, yeah, but we can't know anything about the future, and we can know things about the past. For the past, we have monuments, we have books, we have battlefields. We've got evidence about the past, concrete, specific evidence, and that lets us study the past and know things about the past. And in contrast, we just can't know anything about the future. We don't have any artifacts from the future. We don't have any sites from the future that we know, particular things, no documents from the future. I think that's a mistaken intuition, but it's common. And the key idea people have is that, when the future changes, it's just so unpredictable and so random that there's just no way you could say anything about it. And of course, the way we actually predict the future is to use our theories about the world that we construct from the data today and the past. So the way to do futurism is to apply our theories. And then people might say, yes, but we hardly know anything, and our theories just aren't good enough to talk about the future. And so in Age of M, I wanted to show that was wrong. I wanted to take a very particular future scenario and show in great detail, tedious detail, I admit, pile and pile of detail, overwhelming detail, that I could say a lot about a particular future scenario using all of our standard best theory. That was my goal. I don't think it's a crazy scenario. I think it's actually relatively likely, but it's a scenario where I could play this game unusually well. The key idea is, what if we had brain emulations and that they were cheap enough to field widely? So a brain emulation is where we take a particular human brain like yours and we scan it in fine spatial and chemical detail to see which kinds of cells are where, connected to what. And then we have computer models of how each kind of cell in your brain works in terms of taking signals in and translating into signals out and changes of state. And if we have a good enough scan of your brain and good enough models of how each cell works, and we have enough big, fast, cheap computers, then we can make a computer model of your whole brain. And then if that's cheap enough, it could substitute for you. That is, it would have the same input-output behavior as you do. So we could hook it up with artificial eyes and ears and hands and mouth, and then we could talk to it like we talk to you. We could ask it to do things like we might ask you to do things, and then we might succeed in getting it to do things. And if it were cheaper than you, this changes everything. And so my book was just working out all those changes, taking as the key assumption there exist brain emulations, and then figuring out how that world changes. And it changes a lot. So my first lesson is, it's possible to predict the future in this sense, picking a set of technical assumptions and working through their details. And the next big implication is, it's a big change. Now, that's what you should have expected anyway, I would claim. That is, if you look at how much things have changed in history, how different our world is from the world of 200 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or 20,000 years ago. If you really understood how much change has happened, your expectations for the future would also be a lot of change. And this particular analysis confirms that. It's a lot of change. And in particular, a lot of the way you don't understand the past is how they had different values from you. And they might have looked at your world and been very impressed by some things and somewhat horrified by others, because values have changed across history. And that's one of the things that historical fiction lies to you the most about. Historical fiction tends to fill their stories with modern style characters, at least for the main characters. And they were just not modern style people. They were different kinds of people. And the more you can understand that, the more you should expect the future to be full of different kinds of people with different values from yours. And the Age of M confirms that. That is, it's a very different world with creatures who are very different from you. They like their world, just like you like yours, but you might not like them.
And you might not like them due to their values and maybe their ethics, because they've changed over the years. So when we're looking into the future, and for you specifically, what are your thoughts on time travel?
If it were possible to travel in a time machine, then we face an enormous puzzle. Where are the time travelers? If it were possible to travel to here, or even in our past, from future times, then we would expect a lot of such travel if there is anybody in the future to come here. So honestly, if you show me that time travel is possible, I kind of have to believe we go extinct soon and that there's nobody anywhere else in the universe but us. Because any alien civilization anywhere who had a time machine, they could go anywhere in the universe. They could be here now. They could be at the beginning of the universe anywhere else. Any one alien civilization anywhere in the universe could fill up the entire universe just with having a time machine. And yet the universe is empty. So the puzzle of the empty universe is much bigger puzzle when time travel is possible. It basically says, look, nobody anywhere wants to come here. No one anywhere wants to come here, period. Anywhere in space-time. Probably because they don't exist, i.e. it's all empty, it's all dead. So plausibly, the first time we use a time machine, it destroys everything, and that's the explanation. Yes, a time machine is possible, except if you misuse it, boom, that's the end.
I guess that's the scary part when it comes to time travel. And there's a lot of theories, and there's a lot of people kind of speculating on if it's possible. People have attempted to try it, from my knowledge, but it is an incredibly complex topic. But I think it's also one that's exciting to muse about. To go, like, if I had a time machine, I'd be like, oh, I wish I could have not done what I did in the past, or like, I wish I could have fixed a relationship, or like, I wish I didn't eat that and get food poisoning. You know what I mean? For like these little simple things. But let's continue with this thought. Let's say you did have a time traveler machine. What would you do with it? Would you go in the past, or would you go into the future?
So just an editorial comment first. Science fiction is full of descriptions of strange future worlds. One of the rationales for science fiction is in order to figure out what the future might be like. But in fact, most science fiction is done for other literary purposes. And I think time machines are a good example of that. That is, in principle, time machines might be possible, but the vast majority of people who like stories about time machines are because of the literary possibilities it gives you, not because that might actually happen and that might be the real future. And so, if I take it in that spirit, I might say, well, then as a character in a story, what would I do with a time machine? Well, of course, one thing I might want to do is to go to the future and then bring something back. Bring back, powerful insights, technologies, at least, figure out where we're going so maybe we can influence that. That might be what I might want to do with a time machine. Obviously, for personal benefits, I might want to just, take a copy of, say, the stock market page and go back 10 years and go make a big killing on investments at the time, right, as personal benefits. But anyway, I do think time machines are really actually quite unlikely to be possible at all. And therefore, they're mostly a literary device. If time machines are possible, they're most likely possible in a situation where they only work when, once you've made one, you can go within the light cone future of the first date you made a time machine. So that is, some of the ways people have proposed to make a time machine using general relativity is you take what's called a wormhole, and then you spin one end of the wormhole fast, and while the other one stays slow. And so then they have a time difference between the two ends of the wormhole. And that allows you to go back in time through the wormhole, but only back to the point when the wormhole was made. So under that theory, then, the fact that we aren't now being visited by time travelers is explained by the fact, well, they could only go back to the first date of the creation of the wormhole. They could never go back any earlier than that. And since we haven't created it, they can't come back to here. So that's a better theory in the sense that allows us to be more hopeful about not killing ourselves with a time machine.
That's the goal, at least. But I guess at the end of the day, we can only enjoy musing about this. Shifting gears a little bit, majoring in philosophy, I see that with so much that you do with your research and with your social media presence, you just want to understand. You take things apart, such as constructs of the mind, getting into the nitty-gritty of it. You posted an interesting tweet that said, "What does it mean to do something for its own sake?" And that got me thinking, like, what does that really mean? So for you, what is the significance of that term?
Well, it turns out I just wrote a blog post on that topic and put it up within the last hour. So I gave a lot of thought to that. Basically, our behavior has many levels of explanation. And for some of those levels, we're consciously aware of them. So for some things we do, we have goals and sub-goals, right? I need food for dinner, therefore I'm going to go to the grocery store, therefore I'm going to get my wallet and get in the car, right? And so we understand why I got my wallet or why I got in the car, because I was going to the grocery store, because I needed it for dinner, right? And so that's a way in which there's different levels of explanation, but we're conscious of those different levels. But as we go deeper into explaining our behavior with further explanations, if we go all the way to the extreme of, say, just looking at humans in general and animals in general and what explains their behavior, we get down to very basic things like needing to survive, needing energy, not getting killed by predators, having children, right? These are some of the basic things animals and humans need to survive, and they're plausible candidates of sort of our ultimate motivations, the things that we ultimately need to do that explain why we go to the grocery store, why we eat dinner, right? But when we consciously think about explaining our behavior, like why do I like to play basketball or something, we often stop at an explanation as just for its own sake, we say. And it's sort of a marker saying we don't want to go further. And we insist that maybe we can't even go further. There is no further to go. There's just this ultimate thing. And so someone might say, why do you love me? And I might say, for you. I love the unique you that you are. And someone might say, no. Do you like my attractiveness, my beauty? Do you like my intelligence? Do you like my wealth? And I might be reluctant to pick one of those things because that might imply that I would swap you for somebody else if they had more of those things, right? So saying I do think something for its own sake, I think can't literally be true in the sense that surely the things we do for their own sakes, we chose because of some of these other deeper factors. They help us get food or survive or get attention, attract mates, all sorts of things that, we achieve through our many behaviors. But for some sorts of behaviors, we put down a marker and we say, I refuse to think about where that comes from. I refuse to talk about the sources of that. I'm just going to say, I do it for its own sake. Or I'm just going to say it's fun. And you might say, why is it fun? I say, there's no why about fun. Fun is just fun. And that just can't be true. I mean, surely there is a why about fun. That is, humans evolved to have fun in some contexts and not in others. And there's a long history there. And if we looked at the details of what people find fun versus not, surely we will figure out some explanations for which things are fun. But somebody in the moment of having fun who says, no, I'm just having fun. That's it. I don't want to think about anything else.
Well, if they keep digging of why are they doing this action, you found it to be overall primitive, just back to that kind of like survival instinct. Is that correct?
Eventually, it's going to come back to the basic things we understand that all animals need to do and that humans also need to do. Now, humans were more social than most other animals, so more of our basic reasons are social. We need to impress people. We need to show our loyalty to them. We need to judge the loyalty of others, etc. But yes, there's a standard set of basic explanations for most human behavior. And therefore, most particular behavior, eventually, when you explain it well, you'll get back to those things.
Just going back to point A, and that's we never really fully evolved from cavemen, it seems like. We're still in that primitive mindset with all the actions that we do. We're just kind of going back to the beginning. So then my next question is, how would you define smart, or someone that is smart? How would you define that word?
It's a very contentious word because it matters so much to us. So as an academic, I'm happy to just invoke the standard academic distinctions that we have, but there are still several different kinds of contexts. So first of all, for a human, we look at variations among humans, and we have this concept of IQ, which is the sort of prime factor explanation of variation in human mental performance. And so when I say, what's a smart human? You would say it's a person with a high IQ. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable answer for a certain kind of question. But you might say, well, but what did we want that concept for? What's its purpose, right? So then I might back off and I might say, look, to do things in the universe, you have different tasks that you achieve, and some of them are mental tasks or computational tasks, if you will, or reasoning or inference tasks. And many tasks are a mix of mental tasks and other tasks. But, when you go to the grocery store, etc., some of the things you have to do can be factored off as a mental task. Plan your route to get there, figure out whether you can afford to buy the particular item that you were thinking of buying, etc. Those are mental tasks. And so one way to think about intelligence is just being better at mental tasks. And in that sense, it's half of everything. That is, if the world is getting things done, then half of getting things done at least is doing the mental things that need to get done. And so intelligence is just a name for half of everything. And that way of thinking about it means you shouldn't expect it to be very simple, because you've basically picked half of everything and given it a name. So that's a dispute I've had with some associates in terms of some people are imagining we will find ways to make intelligence much more advanced with a few relatively simple improvements. And I find that unlikely because it's just such a large scope of things you're trying to improve all at once. So I have this blog post I call the betterness explosion, where I give a hypothetical. Imagine somebody has a company with a business plan. So you're in a business school, right? Here's their business plan. Well, I'm going to study betterness for a few years. And when I figure out how to make anything better, then I'm going to make lots of things better. I'm going to make burgers better. I'm going to make cars better. I'm going to make, house cleaning better. I'm just going to make thousands of things better. So if you invest in my betterness research project, in a few years, I'm going to make you all this money because I'm going to start all these new, better businesses in all these different areas. Now, your question as an investor is, how believable is it that someone could find a generic way to make everything better by just thinking about the concept of betterness? I find that pretty unlikely, see. But it's a similar question about intelligence. If somebody says, well, look, my business plan is to go think about intelligence and come up with a better way to just be intelligent about everything. So you should invest in my business because as soon as I do that, I'm going to make a whole bunch of other businesses, all of which are more intelligent than their competitors. You might similarly go, yeah, I don't believe you're going to be able to do that. That just is too big, implausibly big a thing you think you're going to find.
Do you think that possible personality traits could improve that intelligence or degrade it?
Again, the key issue is the breadth of the scope of the concept we're thinking about, right? So let's think of, energy efficiency, right? If we were looking at a particular refrigerator in front of us and you ask me, can you make this refrigerator more energy efficient? There's probably ways to do that, right? If you then said, can you make the universe more energy efficient? I'm going to go, well, all of it, all at once, really? Right? So the more narrow a problem you offer me, the easier I can think about how to prove it. So when you ask, can we improve intelligence? Now, again, I say, well, how wide a scope are we talking about, right? If you had a classroom of fellow business students and you say, how can we be smarter at the intro classes, say? Well, there probably are ways to think about how business students could be smarter about their intro classes. But that's not a way to be smarter that will work for everything everywhere. That's just, if you say, how can we just be smart about everything everywhere? That's just like too big a scope to be thinking you could do with one thing that would work the same everywhere. You see the difference?
Yeah, it's very difficult. So from a scientific standpoint, what do you hope to see when it comes to the UFO phenomenon?
Like I said, my initial priority was to take my expertise in being someone who had come up with the Grabby Aliens model and been a world expert on reasoning about real aliens, to come up with the most plausible explanation for how it could be that there might be aliens here visiting Earth at the moment. And we started talking about that with the panspermia, but we didn't finish because there's 2 other parts you'd have to explain to make that theory plausible. So my personal agenda is mainly to make people see that it's not a crazy unlikely hypothesis. It's maybe 1 in 1,000, and therefore is deserving of an investigation, just like an accusation of murder might be, because then you might lead to a murder trial, right? So I would certainly like to see just more careful evaluation of the concrete physical evidence that's out there in order to judge whether or not it's believable or not. That's not my area of expertise, but I want that to happen. Given the current world where it's a bit of a taboo, I think that'll take a while. I think the usual intellectual elites have decided a long time ago that this was crazy unlikely, and therefore they've set themselves their reputation on the line to say that, to take that stance, and they're not going to let go very lightly. But I would like over time for eventually them to relent enough for people to actually, look carefully at this evidence.
Where do you think the UFO topic is heading? Or do you think other factors are attached that affect the UFO topic?
Well, one big question is why the US government recently relented to give more attention and respectability to the topic. Because basically this topic was stuck for a long time without that extra attention. So one possibility is just kind of a random fluctuation, and it'll just go away, and we'll go back to the old ways of doing things where it was just sort of giggled at and ignored, right? Another thing might be that this is sort of the beginning of a new era where a lot more attention will go to this. I'm not that optimistic about that. But I think, it's worth mentioning at this point that we actually have, say, 4 major categories of explanations for UFOs. I think UFOs as aliens is one of them, and it's not crazy and deserves investigation, but it's actually not my favorite explanation at the moment. So the 4 categories of explanations are: 1, that it's just mistakes and misunderstandings. People are drunk, or they're seeing Venus or swamp gas or whatever else it is, right? And there's just really nothing there other than mistakes. Another class of explanations is that it's a hoax. Somebody out there has organized a big project to have people lie and make up evidence and fool people into thinking something's happening when it's not. A third category of evidence is that it's real and these are amazing things and their aliens are behind them. And a fourth category of explanation is these things are real and they're amazing, and some other hidden organization on Earth is behind them. Those are our 4 major categories of explanations.
And in your opinion, which one seems most plausible?
The highest prior and a reasonable likelihood from the evidence, I think, has to go with the hoax explanation. The US government in World War II did a lot of pretty big hoaxes, including the Manhattan Project and the D-Day invasion. And we also have evidence of big secret things the US did where they kept it secret for many decades. For example, the beginning of the Vietnam War, we lied about an attack supposedly on us that gave us the excuse to get involved in the war. But we kept that secret for many decades. So the US government has just clearly shown a capability and an inclination to have big hoaxes when it thought it suited their interests. And the UFO phenomena roughly started right after World War II. And the main initial reports were in the United States, and the main recent reports are in the United States. And we can make up an explanation for why they might want to make a hoax like this. It's not a really strong explanation, but I'd say I give it a prior maybe 1%, which is 10 times larger than 1 in 1,000. I'd say there's a 1% plausible chance that the US would get into its head that it wants to fake UFOs. And if it got that into its head and wanted to spend enough money on it, then you know what? Yeah, it could do it.
It just seems that we simply can't trust anyone or anything. Robin, thank you so much for being on Shifting the Paradigm. Where can people find you online to stay up to date with your research?
I have a website, hansen.gmu.edu. You can find me on Twitter at Robin Hansen.
You're listening to the UNX Network, KUNX DB, Kansas City, Missouri.
I wish to thank Robin once again for coming on Shifting the Paradigm. Hearing his mathematical theories on the grabby aliens and the Great Filter really blew my mind. I would like to mention that all of his social media links and books are in the description box below. Follow me on Twitter at eyes_on_the_skies to catch all of my updates and news. Don't forget you can get a free quarterly digital magazine on the UNX Network website and a free 7-day trial for the Skinwalker Ranch Insider. The links are below. I want to wish you all a wonderful week. Please like this video or podcast on your platform of choice and share it with those who have the same interests. Subscribe if you haven't already, because there's a lot more great shows coming to you soon. Be safe and remember, keep your eyes on the skies.